I'm actually going to read the first verse to give us an introduction into this this section here. So Matthew chapter 8, we're at verse 18. So let me read that verse and we'll get started. Matthew 8:18 says, when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave a command to depart to the other side. So first of all, remember where we are. So we just had these three amazing miracles that Jesus performed. The leper, the Gentile, the woman, right? Where Jesus just did some amazing things, and so and then we looked at verse 16, if you remember, right? And it ends with he cast out spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. So Jesus is just going around following the sermon. There are multitudes of people, and he's healing everyone who was sick. And so as a result of that, we see this multitude then in verse 18. There's this multitude around him, and he gave a command to depart to the other side. So the other side of what, by the way?
A lake.
A lake called
the Sea of Galilee.
Sea of Galilee?
Yeah. Right. So he's at Capernaum, which is kind of in the northwest corner of the sea, and he's giving them direction. Hey, let's go to the other side of the lake. Now, when he does this, by the way, flip to Mark for a minute. In Mark chapter 4, we have the same time history. And there's a little thing added, which is kind of I've never seen before. Mark chapter 4, verse 36. We can start in 35. Mark 4:35 says, on the same day when evening had come, he said to them, let us cross over to the other side. So same statement. Then 36, it says, now when they had left the multitude, they took him along in a boat as he was, and other little boats were also with him. I just never seen that picture before. So this is we're going to get to the story where Jesus is in this boat in the storm, all that you know the story. But I just find it interesting here that there's a bunch of little boats that are following behind, right? He's going to this. I just see this little trail of boats following Jesus and his boat as he goes across. Now, the interesting thing here, the important thing that's going on though is, you had this crowd. They're following him. They got to this point. They're now at the edge of the sea. Jesus decides to get in a boat and to go to the other side. So the people in the crowd now have to make a decision. Am I going to get in a boat and follow him across the lake, or am I going to go back home? Right? They had a decision. They had a decision to make. There's a lot of people that are attracted people to Jesus, but to really make a decision to follow him was something else. To really make a decision to get in the boat and go after him, this was decision time for them. And so what we're going to see this morning is the story of three, what I call three hot prospects that Jesus encounters and how he responds to them. What we'll see is, Jesus never pushed people to some kind of emotional state to make a decision for him, which it seems a lot of times happens in churches these days. We get people emotional and then, you got to come down front and make a decision. You never see that with Jesus. He just said, follow me. And what he was expecting was a life commitment from that statement. And in fact, as we've seen before, he makes the barriers pretty high to get in, right? It's a narrow gate. It's a narrow way, right? And we've seen other people who are going about the broad way, and he says, no, I don't know you. You're going in a different direction. So we're going to see the same thing play out here as these three different people approach him in his response to them. So what we'll see is these people, we've just seen all these miracles and all these healings. The problem is they have forgotten the sermon already. They have forgotten the Beatitudes. They're all focused on the miracles and the healings, and they're kind of forgetting about poor in spirit and mourning over sin and self-denial and all those things that Jesus has talked about. All right, so let's get into the first one in verse 19. It says, then a certain scribe came and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. So this is kind of amazing, really. You have this scribe. Remember who the scribes were? They were the authorities on the law, right? They were the ones who kind of copied the Old Testament. They were the ones who read it and studied it and understood it. This would have been a really great person to be saved, right? Someone who really understands the law, for them to be able to say, hey, I now understand what the law is all about. This is in today's parlance, this is the really popular kid that we think if they just got saved, what an impact they could have, right? What an influence. Maybe this is the star basketball player that we're wishing would get saved because of the influence that they could have on others. Well, this would be the scribe. This is when this guy came and he says, Master, teacher, I'm going to follow you wherever you go. Most of us would go, man, come on in. This is great. It's good to have a scribe amongst the group, and we're glad to have you, et cetera, et cetera. The statement he makes is not a bad one, right? I mean, teacher, or some of your translations may say master, right? He's using that strong word to say that he understands that he's a teacher, that he is someone to be followed. In these days that the rabbis would typically have followers. They'd have people that would be studying under them. So he's kind of saying, hey, I recognize that you are a teacher. You are someone that I should follow, that I should listen to, obviously, from all of the things that I'm seeing. It's a very eager, very emotional response. He obviously was astounded by the miracles. Wherever you go, I'm going to go with you. I'm just telling you, we would have taken this guy and signed him up and gotten him into a Sunday school class. He would have been an easy win for us, right? But look at Jesus's response in verse 20, which is just kind of a bizarre response. So verse 20, and Jesus said to him, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. And then that's it. Then he goes on to talk to somebody else. This is his whole response to this guy. So what is he saying? What's going on here? Essentially, he's saying that the basic comforts of life that even wild animals have, I don't have. I don't have those personal comforts. I don't have my own foxhole. I don't have my own nest to lay my head. I have nowhere to lay my head. I don't have those things. I don't have those personal comforts. I don't have those worldly possessions. If you come with me, you're not going to get those things. I want you in a minute to look at Gospel of John, chapter 2. John chapter 2, verse 23. John 22:23. It says, now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover, during the feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs which he did. But Jesus did not commit himself to them, because he knew all men, and had no need that anyone should testify of man, for he knew what was in a man. It's kind of a fascinating statement, right? Many believed in his name when they saw the miracles that he had, but Jesus did not commit himself to them. In other words, Jesus said, I never knew you. I don't know you. You think you know me. You think you believe in me because of the signs, because of the miracles, but I don't know you, because he knows all men. He knows what's in their heart. He knows what's real. And I think we have the same thing now back in Matthew. We have the same situation where this man comes. He's very fervent. He's very excited. He's seen all the miracles. He uses the right words, but Jesus knows what's in his heart. Jesus knows that when all of a sudden they don't have a hole to lay their head in, they don't have a nest to rest in, this guy is going to run away. This guy is looking for, hey, I want to add Jesus to my lifestyle. I want to just add him on. I want to learn from him, but I'm not interested in following, which is all Jesus is really interested in him doing. Look at also in Matthew chapter 13, and we'll be studying this later, but the great story about the parable of the sower, right? We have one example right here of this man in verse verse 5. Matthew 13 verse 5. Is that what I said? Yeah. Matthew 13:5. Right, some of the seed fell on stony places where they did not have much earth, and they immediately sprang up because they had no depth of the earth. But when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. So this is what Jesus sees in this man. He sees somebody who's very excited, who has sprung up very quickly, who is saying he wants to follow Jesus, but Jesus knows that when the sun comes up, when the heat comes, when there's no more comfort anymore, when things get a little uneasy, this guy is not going to he's not going to be hanging around. The man saw all the exciting things that were going on, but he didn't count the cost. He didn't understand the sacrifice. He didn't understand the suffering that was coming. And you actually see no repentance in the man also, right? And by the way, go back again to Matthew chapter 8. What was the man's response to what Jesus says here? So Jesus makes this comment in verse 20. What's the man's response?
We don't know.
Doesn't tell you.
Well, we don't know, right? It doesn't say. And in fact, somehow this man disappears in the white space between verse 20 and verse 21, right? The man is no longer around, which says a lot, actually, which says that the man, just left at that point. When he understood what Jesus was saying to him, and he leaves at this point. There's no comments more made about this man. So he was there for when Jesus brought up the issues around personal comfort. This man left the fold. There's a couple other things in this verse that we need to see other than this general lesson. One is this phrase "Son of Man" that's in here. This is actually used in the New Testament. I think one of the commentaries said over 80 times. It actually starts back in Daniel, where this phrase is first used. Those of you who've been around long enough to remember that, this picture of Son of Man. When Jesus uses it, when talking about himself, he's talking about his human side, right? So he's pointing out his human side. He's saying the Son of Man here on earth has nowhere to lay his head. When he talks about himself as Son of God, then he's obviously talking about his deity side. But when he uses this phrase "Son of Man," he's always talking about his human side and the human reaction and what's going on there while he's on earth. So here he's saying, while I'm here on earth, there is not going to be anywhere to lay my head. I do want to show you again, just to remind us, go to Matthew chapter 10. This is, we're going to get to this pretty soon, kind of in a, decadal kind of sense. But anyway, in Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, I just want to read this little section to you. Matthew 10, verse 16. Jesus here talking to the disciples says, "Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, scourge you in their synagogues. You will be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, do not worry about how or what you should speak, for it will be given to you in that hour what you should speak. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. Now brother will deliver up brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake. But he who endures to the end will be saved." This is the call that Jesus has to his disciples, right? It's obviously everything is going to be wonderful, and your life is going to be much easier now that you're a Christian, right? I mean, it's exactly the opposite. You're going to be thrown into jail. Your family is going to turn against you. Everyone will hate you. This is not the picture that this man thought when he said, "Master, I want to follow you wherever you go." This is not the picture he had in his mind of what what was going to be offered to him. You even remember, back to the Beatitudes, right? It ends with, men will revile you and persecute you, right? Again, these folks kind of forgot what he had already taught them, and they're just focusing on the miracles. And man, I want to be around somebody who does all these miracles, not understanding that there's a character, there's a life expectation that Jesus is calling them to when he's calling to follow. There's a price to be paid as a Christian. All right. So, by the way, just don't forget, we would have loved this guy, right? Would have been glad to have him in our group. All right. So let's look at the second guy. In verse, was there a comment?
Can I ask a question? Your reference in Mark chapter 4, 36 or 35 and 36, do you have mine in the NIV says, leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was. Is that something like you were talking about? You didn't notice that there were other boats, but I just noticed that it says just as he was. Is that referring back to the foxes have holes and birds of the air? Like just as he was, he has no place to lay his head, or is that just an NIV thing?
I don't know. I wasn't looking at that, so that zipped right by me. Let me go back and take a look and find out. I don't know.
All right, I just didn't know if you already.
No, it's an interesting statement though, and thanks for pointing it out. So I'll take a look. All right, good. Verse 21, I think is where we are. Then another of his disciples said to him, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father." So first thing we got to point out is when he says here disciples, he's not talking about the 12. He's just talking about those who are following him, right? Another of his disciples, another of the people who are following him, said to him this thing, right? So again, these people are on the edge of the lake. They're getting ready to go in the boat. This disciple comes up to him and said, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father," right? It seems to be a reasonable thing. If his dad has died, that he is given time to go and bury his father. Everything in Scripture says that you got to take care of your parents, and if this is a real issue, then he definitely should go and do it. But Jesus' response in verse 22, right? But Jesus said to him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead," seems to be a kind of a crash statement to what he is saying to Jesus. What he is saying to this man. But the thing that we got to understand here is this phrase, "Let me first go and bury my father," is actually a colloquial phrase. It meant more than it says. And in fact, in this particular case, what he is saying is, in fact, his father is probably not dead. He's saying, "Let me go and I need to finish up with my family. I need to wait until my father dies so that I get the inheritance, and then I can come and follow you," right? Once that happens and my father dies, I get the inheritance, I fulfill all my responsibilities, I receive the cash, then I can come and follow. And by the way, think how wonderful it will be then, because I'll have all this money. I can really help you, Jesus. I can help support the ministry if you just give me this time to go and take care of my responsibilities, wait until my father dies, et cetera, et cetera. Then by the way, you'll have money to lay a place to lay your head, because I'll have the cash. So this is the guy that's saying, I'll follow you someday when I can afford it, when things are right, when all the situations are in place, when my kids are out of the house, when I retire, when I blah, 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 then I'll follow you. Then. And of course, Jesus knows exactly what's in this man's heart, as he knows what's in every man's heart, right? And so in verse 22, then his response is, "Follow me" is a command, and it would be better said, "Follow me now, dag nabbit," right? He's saying, "Follow me now." Not don't put it off, not follow me someday, not follow me when you get your act together, not follow me when you think I'm really interested in your money. You really think that's the important thing to following me? And he says, let the dead bury their dead. What he's saying in that statement, again, that's a little colloquialism for the time. He's saying, let the spiritually dead bury the physically dead. Look at in Luke chapter 9, there's an additional phrase that goes along with this statement. So look there a minute. In Luke chapter 9, verse 60. It's a long chapter. Luke chapter 9, verse 60. And Jesus said to him, let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and preach the kingdom of God. You go and do the work that I need you to do. You go and follow me, right? You have been called to do kingdom kind of work. And this guy is absolutely functioning on the wrong level. He's worried about his finances. He's worried about inheritance. He's worried about the secular system when Jesus is calling him to the kingdom system, right? To God's system. He's being asked to do something incredible, something great, and he's holding on to the world system, to the secular system, and thinks that's more important.
Rich, do you see that as a delayed obedience is still disobedience thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep, just putting it off, putting it off, putting it off. It's disobedience. Yep. Look at Matthew 19 a minute. Matthew 19, verse 21. I'm looking at Luke and I'm wondering why it doesn't look right. Matthew 19. What's funny is I did the same thing the other night when I was studying this. All right, Matthew 19, verse 21. It says, and Jesus said to him, if you want to be perfect, go sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come, follow me. But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possession, right? This is the rich young ruler story. So again, right, Jesus knows what is real. I got to go back up. I guess I hadn't, since we got a minute, go back to verse 17, Matthew 19:17. We'll spend a good amount of time when we get to this. But so he said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good but one, that is God. But if you want to enter the kingdom of life, if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. And he said to him, which ones? Jesus said, do not commit murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, honor your father and mother, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And the young man said to him, all these things I have kept from my youth. What do I still lack? So the real problem this man had was right there, right? In that he believed he kept the Old Testament perfectly. And we have learned, in Matthew chapter 5, that this man, just like all of the Pharisees, did not understand when Jesus said, you shall not commit murder, you shall not commit adultery. He didn't understand what those things meant. So this man was full of pride. I've kept those things from my youth. I've done all that. I'm perfect with regard to law. And Jesus, knowing that, then in verse 21 says, if you want to be perfect, go sell what you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, right? But the young man heard that saying, and he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. So Jesus knows what's in his heart and knows where the crux of his issue is, which is right on him, holding on to the world, holding on to his possessions. And this is exactly the same thing that we see in the second man then in Matthew. The second man in Matthew, when he says, let me go bury my father. which is really about his inheritance. And he says, no, you got to follow me. This is not about those things. So, so what happens to this man?
We don't know that either.
We don't know. So he leaves between verses 22 and 23. He kicks out, right? So here we have, so far we've had two men who have come to Jesus, saying these wonderful things, but when Jesus confronts them with their real issue, all of a sudden they check out. But again, let me just remind you, we would have loved this guy. He's just wanting to go and bury his dad. Sure, go and take care of that. He just wanted to get his finances in order before he comes into the church. He certainly was going to be a big asset to the church because, he's going to have all this inheritance. We would have made sure we signed this guy up. We put him on the finance committee, right? Because, he's going to be a big giver, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, again, we tend to look at people through such worldly eyes, and Jesus looks at him in a completely different way. All right, now let's look at the third man. Do you see where the third man is? Anybody found the third man yet?
Yeah, Luke 9.
You a smart dude. Let's go back to Luke chapter 9. Yep, we were just there a minute ago. In Luke chapter 9, there's three men that Jesus deals with, and it's only two of them in Matthew. So let's look at him. Let's look at him in Luke chapter 9. And we're at 9 and in verse 61. Luke 9:61, it says, and another also said, Lord, I will follow you, but let me first go and bid them farewell who are at my house. Jesus said to him, no one having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God. So again, this is one of those colloquialisms. I can't say that word. I will follow you, but first let me go and bid them farewell who are at my house. So again, this does not seem unreasonable on the surface. This guy's about to get in the boat. He's about to follow Jesus. Jesus, expectations to follow him for life. Let me at least go back, say goodbye to my family, bid them farewell, everyone who's there, so that I can, go forward with you. But again, what Jesus understands is, by his statement, no one having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God. This man's family, this man's relationships are going to keep him from following Christ. It may well be that this man, when he goes home, they convince him, hey, that Jesus guy is nuts. You really shouldn't be following him. You need to come back with us. And and Jesus again is saying, no, you shouldn't be turning around and looking behind you. I'm asking you to follow me. I'm asking you to go forward. So this reminds me again when we talked about the narrow way and the narrow gate. We made the statements that you can only go through you can only go through the gate by yourself. You can't take other people with you. It's an individual decision. It's a personal decision, and that's what this guy lacked. He was all about, hey, I got to go and talk to my family. I got to have the discussion. But Jesus is saying, no, you got to go in the boat now. You got to get in the boat now, and you got to get in by yourself. You can't have a. Was there a comment?
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but
I
when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Well, I think about this verse a lot, and when I really think about it is when I'm working in my garden and I'm making rows up. So when I'm making rows up, I want to be straight. So I always put a stick at the far end to keep my eyes fixed on that, because I know if I stop and turn around to see if I am going straight, it's going to end up all crooked. So I think that's a neat, it fits right into this. You got to keep your eyes fixed on what's ahead, because if not, it's not going to be straight like you want it.
That's good. That's a good analogy. Because he's really saying here, you can't have a divided heart. where you're worried about going back, you're worried about what's behind you. Frankly, you're worried about other relationships. You're worried about what people will think about you. You're worried about, is that person still going to be my friend? So, all three of these are about salvation. Yeah, they're about discipleship also, and we can make those jumps. But really, he's talking about getting in the boat, right? He's talking about salvation, and he's saying if you've got a divided heart, if you're still thinking about your family, if you're still thinking about your relationships, you're still thinking about the world, you shouldn't be following me. You're not someone that I want to follow.
It's like I got to trust in that stick. If I trust and I don't look back, it's going to be straight. But if I don't trust myself and trust that stick, it's not going to turn out like I want it to.
Yep. So, was there another comment? I turn to Matthew chapter 10 again. Luke again. Yeah, turn back to Matthew. I keep forgetting I turn to Luke and I get confused. Matthew chapter 10, verse 34. There's these amazing statements. Matthew 10:34. Do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be those in his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. I mean, it's a very strong statement about us setting our relationships aside to follow Christ. And so I'm just going to stop there and rather than. So again, he's saying you can't be saved with half a heart. You're saying it's a narrow way. You can't bring anyone else with you. You can't bring your mama along, right? You got to go through this and make this decision yourself. So, whoa, look what time it is. I'm nearly done. How does this happen? Okay, y'all are not interrupting me enough. So what we've seen in these three men are, one, the first man was interested in his own personal comfort. The second man was interested in his riches, his inheritance, his relationship to the world system. And the third one really interested in relationships that really kept him. All three of these men did not get in the boat, did not follow Christ because of these issues. And they're the same issues that people face today for not following Christ. Now, I do want you to see one other thing, however. In John chapter 6, turn there. There's this fascinating section. In John chapter 6 that I want to pull out a couple of verses from. And I was wondering whether I was going to hear this from one of you. In chapter 6, verse 37. John 6:37. Jesus says here, all that the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will by no means cast out. So here's Jesus saying, if someone comes to me, I'm not going to cast them out. If someone comes to me, I'm going to accept them. They're going to be part of the kingdom if someone comes to me. Well, this seems to be in conflict with what all the things we've just read. We've got these three men who have come to him, who have, teacher, master, I want to go wherever you go, right? And it does appear that he is casting them out. So what's going on here? I would invite you to read the rest of that whole chapter, but let me just show you a couple of verses. First of all, verse 44, still in John 6:44, says, no one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day. So he's saying no one can actually come to me unless the Father sends him. Then look down at he starts talking about being the bread of life and man in the wilderness and all this stuff. Look down at verse 53. It says, and then Jesus said to them, most assuredly I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. Whoa, that's interesting. So go down to verse 60. I love this. Verse 60 says, therefore many of his disciples, again, followers, they heard this, said, this is a hard saying. Who can understand this, right? They start talking about eating and his body and drinking his blood. And then in verse 64, it says, but there are some of you who do not believe. For Jesus knew from the beginning who they were who did not believe and who would betray him. And he said, therefore I have said to you that no one can come to me unless it has been granted to him by my Father. From that time, many of his disciples went back and walked with him no more. So we begin this section again in verse 37, saying, those who come to me, I'm not going to cast out. But we end it here in verse 66, right? From that time, many of his disciples went back and walked with him no more. So it's not that Jesus has cast these people out. These people have decided when they hear what it really is all about, what this Christian life is about, this relationship with him, this following him completely for the rest of their lives, they walk away. They went back to their old life. They went back to their comfortable life. They went back to their worldly life. They went back to their relationships, and they didn't follow him anymore. It's an incredibly sad story and statement that we see, right? For people who have been introduced to Christ, they'll get excited by a Christmas service, or they'll get excited by something that they've attended or heard or watched on TV. But then when they really find out what this Christian life is all about, the sacrifice, the suffering, the full commitment to Christ, all of a sudden they walk away. So that's what we have in these three men.
Hey, Rich, there's another verse in there that I'm glad you sent us to this chapter, because I was looking for this verse for a little bit and I couldn't remember it. But 6:29, they're asking what do you need to do to follow God? What works? And he said the work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent. And so one thing I think on following Christ, if you focus on all the things in discipleship, we can't do them. We can't on our own. And so sometimes it's easy, we think about really following him, there are all these things that we have to do. And then, God, Christ said, just focus on me. It's about him. It's that relationship that sustains us and allows us to do some things. So sometimes I think in discipleship and looking at that, we could look at, well, I can't do that. I can't do that. And, we can't. So that, reminds us what works do we have to do? We just have to believe and focus on him.
Yeah, good.
I think also, when you're saying that it appeared that they were called to him, but they really weren't called to him. They were called to what they thought they were seeing. They were called to an activity, or they were being called. Like you said, you see something at the church and you go, wow, I want to be part of that. But it wasn't really Christ they were following. It was this, big scene or whatever was going on is really what they were. So it's not that he's turning them away from his calling. They just weren't called to the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's a choice, as you said. I mean, to follow or not to follow, to commit to believe or not to commit to believe. And when you get to that point of, like you said, understanding what you may be giving up, or friendships or relationships or money, our human minds weigh that. like really hard. Like, is it worth it, you know? And
But I think that this takes us back to, right, many in those days will say, Lord, Lord, right? Because I think there are many people in churches who have never counted the cost or are not really following, that are only there for the events, for the worldly relationships in the church, right? You get the difference there, right? The worldly relationships that they have in the church, that's what they're there for. And so this is why, Jesus says, I don't know you. I don't know who you are. You've never had a relationship with me. Because of these things, because of comfort or riches or relationships. I don't want to give up that stuff in the world. I just want to add this Christianity thing on to the rest of my life. I want to add this on so that I feel better, or so that I feel good about, hey, I'm going to go to heaven because all the rest of the people in the room are going to heaven. Certainly I am too, right? They just want to add this on rather than recognize that this is something radical that we're talking about here, a complete life change. So yeah, so we're seeing this kind of singular message throughout all the rest of this part of Matthew. He's really talking about these false hypocrites. All right, anything else on this? Yeah.
Yeah. When you were talking about the first guy and you said something about, well, we would take him right in because, he's going to have he's the teacher, he's the scribe, he knows the law, and we'd be really great to have him in our group. When I heard that, it takes me right back to when Samuel went, Lord sent Samuel to anoint a new king after Saul, and Samuel is there looking over Jesse's sons, and the oldest son comes in and he's a big, tall, strapping fellow, and Samuel says, boy, he's got to be the one. And in Samuel 16 verse 7, 1 Samuel, he says, the Lord says to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And I think everything you pointed out it just verifies that. We see somebody, even we're talking about people that get carried away by services or something like that, and they come forward. God knows what's in their heart. We don't see what's in their heart. We just see the outside.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, absolutely right. So again, let's look at these three guys, right? The first one, we would love to have him because he's popular. And he would bring a lot of other people with him, so we would love to have him. We'd love to have the second guy, right? Because he's all about relationships. He's got the riches, right? He's got the money. He's really going to help out our mission in order to have him as a part of the group. And the third guy is all about relationships, right? And so he's going to be really good with bringing a group together and having a group study because he's all about making sure the relationship. We would love all three of these guys. And we would welcome them and accept them and blah, 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 right? And Jesus, however, understands that that's all they are. They're only about those things. They're not actually about following him. So yeah, good point, Bill. Thanks for bringing that out again. All right, anything else? This doesn't happen very often that I get done early. This is, I'm not sure what's going on here. So let's go ahead and move into prayer requests. For us, of course, Joanne's out of town. She'll be back tonight. So if you could pray for their travel as they travel back this evening after I haven't got an update on the soccer, so I can't give you a score. I'm certainly not going to talk about football. So, prayer requests. Let's see. Let's start with Shannon since she's online.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Just continued prayers for Julie and her family, the Brandenburg family. Her services were last Thursday night. They were streamed online. I was able to watch them, but it was very tough because her son Dustin tried to speak. And as you remember, he's 17 and just facing life without mom is really tough for both the boys. So just keep them in your prayers, and everything else is going really well. That's it.
Right, you there in the room?
After the recording.